were the last, because before you know it, time goes past and life's just not that long. Tell all you love that you love them so, because even if you do, they might not know, and one day we'll all be gone. Taste the wind, don't let it blow on by. Sing songs of love, let the music get you.
Some years ago, I was strongly attracted to my dear friend in his 20s. He knew I am gay. He knew I was attracted to him. And one day, he called me into the room where he was sitting. He had a magnificent, naked heart-on. He was offering himself to me. But I did not have sex with him. And later I explained to him why I did not have sex with him. I told him I was very attracted to him, but I knew how changeable he was. I did not want him feeling ashamed and guilty after sex with me. I did not want him to feel bad toward me as his friend afterward. I did not want him to feel bad about himself and about sex with me. Sadly, many men feel ashamed and guilty after they have sex with men. I want any male friend that I have sex with to feel good afterward about himself, about me, and about our sex together. A special good memory. I'm very glad to have sex with any single, healthy man who is attracted to me and to whom I'm attracted, if he has no shame, no guilt about making love with men. Sugar can cause or worsen 60 diseases and conditions: acne, alcoholism, allergies, anxiety, arthritis, appendicitis, asthma, behavior problems, bone loss, bloating. Sugar can cause or worsen binge eating, cancer. It feeds cancer, big time, sugar. Cataracts, colitis, constipation, depression, diabetes, difficulty concentrating, diverticulitis. Sugar can cause or worsen edema, that's fluid like that builds up in some people's legs and feet. Fatigue, food cravings, gallstones, gout, heart disease, high bad cholesterol, low good cholesterol, hormonal problems, high blood pressure. Sugar can cause or worsen indigestion, insomnia, kidney stones, liver problems, menstrual difficulties, mental illness, mood swings, muscle pain, being fat, all infections, colds, AIDS, tuberculosis, coronavirus, flu, yeast infection, and on and on. Sugar feeds all infections to make them worse. Sugar causes or worsens tooth decay. How well I know from my addiction to sugar when I was a kid and in my 20s, rotting my teeth. Ulcers, nearsightedness, early aging, hyperactivity and orneriness, crankiness in kids, high triglycerides, multiple sclerosis, kidney damage, kidney stones, heart disease. My mother died of kidney disease, and for many years she had been severely addicted to sugar, as I was many years ago. Sugar can cause or worsen varicose veins, emphysema, loss of minerals, high triglycerides, periodontal disease, hypoglycemia, that's low blood sugar, rheumatism, eczema, psoriasis, Crohn's disease, hemorrhoids, retina holes and detachment. And my mother had 2 retina detachment surgeries, and I had a severe problem developing in my retinas back in the 70s, and I had surgery on both eye retinas here in Albuquerque. Sugar is a killer. The Arthritis Foundation says that 10 pounds, just 10 pounds of overweight can put 25 to 50 pounds of stress on your knees. So, if you know anyone who suffers from knee problems, and if they are overweight, even 10 pounds overweight, encourage them to lose the fat. Eating nothing containing added sugar, nothing containing processed vegetable oils, no fast food, no McDonald's, no factory fake food, no booze, if they care about having good knees and being healthy and not suffering. I strongly compliment my gay African American friend Jesse. He told me he had sex with some men married to women. But before Jesse had sex with any of these married men, the man had to first tell his wife, and she had to accept his having sex with Jesse before Jesse would have sex with this married man. No lies, no cheating, no cover-up. Be honest and fair with all people. I strongly compliment my gay African American friend Jesse for his example. The French explorer Pierre Liet, after 4 years of living among the Illinois Indians, 4 years living among the Illinois Indians, said in 1702, over 400 years ago, the sin of sodomy, which means sex between men, prevails more among them than in any other nation. And sadly, this French explorer thought that men giving each other sexual pleasure was a sin. Crazy how people can call good evil and evil good. I suppose he would have had no problem seeing men fight each other, even beat each other up till pulp. But because they gave each other sexual pleasure, he called it a sin. And he said it prevails more among these Illinois Indians than in any other nation. How sad that he was so warped in his thinking. Parents, if you're buying cigarettes and your child goes to bed hungry, how do you feel about yourself as a parent? If you buy beer and wine and your child goes to bed hungry, how do you feel about yourself as a parent? If you buy lottery tickets and go to the casinos and your child goes to bed hungry, how do you feel about yourself as a parent? If you know how to read and are not reading to your child, and you're not making sure your child's homework is done, how do you feel about yourself as a parent? A longtime member of Alcoholics Anonymous said that he drank for happiness and became unhappy. He drank for joy and he became miserable. He drank for sociability and he became argumentative. He drank for sophistication and became obnoxious. He drank for friendship and made enemies. He drank for sleep and woke up tired. He drank for strength and felt weak. He drank for relaxation and got the shakes. He drank for courage and he became afraid. He drank for confidence and he became doubtful. He drank to make conversation easier and he slurred his speech. He drank to feel heavenly and he ended up feeling like hell. From a longtime member of Alcoholics Anonymous. Booze, junk food, cocaine, meth, sugar, heroin, cigarettes, guns are all awful, awful addictions. But no addiction is more harmful than craving much more money, much more stuff than we need. I enjoy having enough, bastante. Healthy food, one sunny rented room, 9.5 by 12 feet with 6 windows to live in, a garden for food and flowers. I enjoy living simply and healthy, below the U.S. poverty level for me as a single person, and below the U.S. federal income taxable level for me as a single person. Why hog much more stuff, much more money than my fair share in the world family? We have over 7 billion, approaching 8 billion sisters and brothers in our world family. And what gives me the right to hog out while millions starve and are homeless? Freedom is not having and not wanting much stuff I do not need. Now, if I didn't have it, but I still wanted it, that would not be freedom. But freedom is not having and not wanting much stuff I do not need. I don't want a big house. I don't want a car. I wouldn't keep a big house or the most luxurious car in Albuquerque if you gave them to me free. I would quickly sell them if I could and use the money for much better things. My time is more precious than millions of dollars. My close relationships more precious than mansions full of expensive crap. I treasure wisdom. I treasure nature. I treasure health. I treasure deep conversations. I treasure dear friends, living and dead. I treasure men I have been in love with. I have no right to much more than I need, while millions suffer on far less than they need. No high-paying job is worth selling out my conscience. No high-paying job is worth silencing my voice publicly on important controversial concerns. I refuse to be an impotent wimp spectator in the bleachers of life. I treasure friends. I treasure heart-to-heart conversations. The more personal, the more deep, the more real, the better. I treasure my friends, old friends, friends living, friends dead, new friends. Sadly, many friends from past years and places I have no contact with. I don't know if they're living or dead. And some friends have turned away, gone cold toward me, because I'm openly gay, or because I'm no longer religious, or because I'm a nudist, or because I am controversial. All kinds of reasons that some people who once were closer to me may have turned away. But my heart's door is not locked if they want to be my friends again. I welcome them back as friends. I learned from my friend Bob in Illinois to keep making new friends and younger friends until the day I die. Before Bob died at 94, he wrote me. He was in Illinois, I in Albuquerque. He wrote me saying, "To my one and only friend." How sad. He had known many people years before in his business in that town, Freeport, Illinois. His beloved wife had died some years before him. He missed her very much. And other personal friends had died. If we live to very old age, and if we do not keep making new friends and younger friends, we can end up friendship bankrupt. And friendship bankrupt is as bad as being hungry and homeless. Friendship bankrupt is as bad as living in a sick body. Never stop making new friends and younger friends as we treasure all our friends, living and dead, old and young. The white man, Francis Parkman, met two native Lakota men during his journey on the Oregon Trail in 1846. He wrote, "They were inseparable. They ate together. They slept together. They hunted together and shared with one another almost all that they possessed. If there be anything that deserves to be called romantic in the Indian character, it is to be sought for in friendships such as this, which are common among many of the prairie tribes. So wrote the white man Francis Parkman in 1846 about two Lakota men who were in very close friendship and relationship with each other. Romantic. Sadly, the main purpose of the U.S. space program is to develop and use weapons in space for the United States to dominate and control the world. It's evil. The U.S. space program is a terrible waste of money, brains, resources that should instead be used to help the world's poorest people. Space travel is a desperate, pie-in-the-sky delusion to escape this crazy, cruel, polluted world. Space exploration is an insane worship of technology to bail us out of taking responsibility to change our lives here and now for a better world. None of our sun's other planets, not Venus, not Mars, not Jupiter, none of the other planets have good conditions for us human beings to live. The worst place on earth for us human beings to live is far better than the best place on our sun's other planets. The next closest star after our sun is 4 light years away. That means if we look up into the night sky and with a telescope we see that star, the light that we see left that star 4 years ago. And the speed of light is 186,000 miles per second, not per minute, not per hour. 186,000 miles per second is 3,600 times 186,000 miles per hour. And even if that star had planets like our Earth, and even if it were possible to travel at the speed of light, 186,000 miles per second, and even if the spacecraft could hold enough food and water and air for the round trip of 8 years, at best, who would be fool enough to be trapped in a spacecraft for 8 years? The highly paid scientists suffer from science fiction fantasy. The highly paid scientists suffer from science fiction insanity. It makes no sense, but it is a distraction for them not to face what they're doing with their own lives here and now on this troubled earth. And they know how to milk the cow of public money or private money to make big wages studying this stupidity. Gambling destroys lives and families. Gambling is a filthy addiction to money. A Chicago mother was charged with suffocating her 3-week-old daughter to collect a $200,000 insurance payment to pay for her gambling addiction. 6 elderly people were robbed and murdered in Louisiana because the killer was addicted to video poker. A 10-day-old baby in South Carolina died in suffocating heat, locked inside a car, while her mother gambled for 7 hours straight. A Louisiana woman killed her parents to collect insurance to pay off her gambling debts. A 19-year-old Iowa college student committed suicide because of gambling addiction. A Kansas City woman killed her husband to collect insurance to pay off her gambling debts. A retired couple in Illinois committed suicide because of gambling addiction. Hundreds of others have killed themselves because of gambling addiction. If someone had told these people 5 years before they would commit these horrors because of their gambling addiction, would any of them have believed it? We so easily lie to ourselves, deceive ourselves, con ourselves when we're addicted, whether it's gambling or booze or cigarettes or junk food or money or buying more and more stuff nobody needs. Addiction blinds us to reality. How can politicians claim to support family values while they accept campaign contributions from casinos? How can politicians claim to work for justice for the poor while they accept contributions from casinos? I damn all gambling. Church bingo, Las Vegas, Nevada gambling casinos, the New Mexico State Lottery, all gambling, I damn. All casinos run by whites or Native Americans or Chicanos or whomever. And the worst of all, Wall Street. I refuse to spend 1 penny on gambling. I have never set foot in a casino, and I never plan to. No matter how long since I've had sex with anyone, no matter how horny I am, I have no right to rape anyone ever. Far better for me never to have sex with anyone the rest of my life than for me to force anyone to have sex with me. Rape is sexual war. Rape is sexual terrorism. Rape is sexual slavery. Rape is treating the other person as a thing to use and abuse with no regard for his or her feelings and humanity. But good sex is always mutual pleasure, both people affectionately giving and receiving pleasure. I want the other person to have good memories of me and our sex together. If the other person decides, for whatever reason, to stop at any point during sex, I have no right to force that person to continue for 1 second longer, no matter what. A million times better to leave and go pleasure myself alone than to force the other person to continue if his heart is not in it. I aim never to do anything to my partner that he would later fear me for or hate me for. Here are parts of the powerful speech damning white supremacy entitled "The South, Slavery, and the Lost Cause" by African-American Jeffrey Robinson, who was director of the ACLU Trone Center, Trone, for Justice and Equality. He said, in 1619, so 402 years ago, there were 20 human beings that were brought to America as slaves. 20. And it all started from that. Because what people figured out very quickly is if you have free labor, the profits that you can make go up exponentially. The first slave ship is built in Massachusetts, not in the South. So this whole thing about, well, it was the bad South and the good North when it came to slavery, no, no, no. America went in all hands on deck. He says, I'm asking you to look at these laws because these laws will help you understand what slavery was about. We know the white slave owners will be raping the black women, but their kids are not going to be free. Let's make that clear right here and right now. We're going to steal their God from them, from the black slaves. But even if they accept our God, they're still slaves. And when you look at that one, and I think about policing in America today, it sends chills up and down my spine. And look at what you can get executed for. Now think of this. Slaves could be executed, put to death, for growing their own food, for learning to read, for assembling in groups. And he says, I remember talking to my great-grandmother who was born to parents who were slaves, and I remember her saying we had to be very careful not to show how smart we really were, because a smart black person was a threat. "40 of the 56 signers of the Declaration of Independence owned other human beings." Think of that. 40 of the 56 signers of the Declaration of Independence owned other human beings. The founding fathers of America had absolutely, positively no problem with white supremacy. They believed in it. It was the truth. It was the reality of their time, and they weren't embarrassed to say it. One of the main reasons that Native Americans were driven off their ancestral land was that the plantation owners had to have room. If you're going to grow cotton and tobacco, you need a lot of land. 13% of the entire American population was enslaved by 1860, the year before the Civil War began. 13 out of every 100 people in this country were slaves. So he says, when I talk about the monuments and the Civil War and the things that are behind this, one of the other things I would encourage you to do, like any other investigation that you would do, is follow the money. To understand what the motivation is, just follow the money. The Indian Removal Act of 1830 took 100,000 adults and sent them on our version of the Long March. And you see how many of them died on that march. What this did to the Choctaw Indians in the southeast was horrendous. And let's talk about Andrew Jackson, who was the architect of the Indian Removal Act. Think about the arguments that we're having in this country today, and it's because the past has been concealed, hidden, lied about, covered up. And he says, this is one of the most amazing books you'll ever see, written in 1839, entitled Slavery as It Is. 22 years before the beginning of the Civil War, this book, Slavery as It Is. And the only thing these people did was to go to newspapers, cut out articles about slavery, and put them in a book. And that's why they called it Slavery as It Is. And he says, I want to show you the real Andrew Jackson, because he had a slave who ran away, and he wasn't having that. So he put an ad in the newspaper. Stop the runaway, and he offered a $50 reward. And that's not what I want to talk to you about. It's the end of this newspaper advertisement put in by Andrew Jackson, one of the U.S. presidents, near Nashville, state of Tennessee. And this is what it says. If you find that slave, $10 extra for every 100 lashes, any person will give to him to the amount of 300. This is years before the Civil War. This is slavery as it is. And everyone knew that this is what slavery was about. It was no secret. There weren't any questions about it. Texas school officials are saying we want our children to learn that slavery was a side issue to the Civil War because it's divisive. We have to look forward. But if you're looking forward from a place that is false, then where you're looking forward to is the road to hell. We can't go forward without acknowledging and facing where we have been. King Cotton was the theory that was used by Southerners before the Civil War to say, we can do this, we can break away from the North, it's economically feasible, and here's why. Everybody depends on our cotton. We can shut down the mills in the North in a heartbeat. Britain and France are going to have to make a decision. Will they support us militarily? Because we can shut down their mills. We just won't send them our cotton. And Senator Henry Hammond of South Carolina, a senator, said this: without firing a gun, without drawing a sword, should they make war on us, we could bring the whole world to our feet. What would happen if no cotton was furnished for 3 years? England would topple headlong and carry the whole civilized world with her, save the South, except for the South. No, you dare not make war on cotton. No power on earth dares to make war upon it because cotton is king. So said Senator Henry Hammond of South Carolina. Follow the money in everything, then and now. This is how important cotton was. The market value of slaves in 1860, the year before the Civil War started, was greater than the market value of every railroad, factory, and bank combined. The market value of slaves in 1860 was greater than the market value of every railroad, every factory, every bank combined. Follow the money. Think about the role of slaves and slave laborers in the economy. The Mississippi Valley today is one of the poorest places in America. But in 1860, it had more millionaires per capita than any other place in the nation. And that was because of slavery. The white plantation owners did not have the capital to hire hundreds of workers to work these gigantic cotton plantations. They had to have free labor, slaves. The mayor of New York City recommended that New York, not the state, but New York City, withdraw from the Union during the Civil War. Why was that? If you go and read, it's because we're making so much money from slavery, we want to keep doing it. That was what they felt. If we withdraw, we can then be friends with the North and we can be friends with the South. They're saying it to you as plainly and as directly as they can. So the people today who say the folks honored on these monuments, the Confederate monuments scattered in many states, were not fighting for slavery. But the truth is, he says, I understand that's what you want to believe. That's what the lie you want to tell yourself. And I understand how difficult it is to wrap your mind around the fact that human beings, fellow Americans, would fight, kill other people, and die to preserve slavery. It's really hard to wrap your mind around that, but that is the ugly truth. And Jeffrey Robinson goes on to say, I was raised to understand that Abraham Lincoln was my savior. I was taught that Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves because he knew that slavery was an abomination, an awful evil. But Abraham Lincoln said on many occasions, if I could preserve the Union, in other words, keep it all together and not have the South leave the Union. If I could preserve the Union and keep slavery, I would do it. If getting rid of slavery is what it takes to preserve the Union, I'll do that too. What his goal was to preserve the Union. He wanted to keep the North and the South together, regardless if slavery stopped or if slavery was done away. And Jeffrey Robinson says, I just want you to know that the debate about reparations for slavery is a completely false one. First of all, go back to 1988 when Ronald Reagan was in office. passed with almost no dissent at all, was a bill giving $20,000 to every Japanese American family that was interned, in other words, imprisoned, during World War II. That was absolutely appropriate, a good thing to do. $20,000 doesn't even begin to compensate those families for what was taken from them, for what they lost, for being essentially imprisoned for the term of World War II. At least it was some acknowledgement that what the U.S. did was wrong. You talk about reparations for slavery, $20,000 for 4 years of internment. What is it for 256 years of slavery? And here's the kicker. Reparations were already paid because in the Emancipation Proclamation, Lincoln set aside $1 million for D.C., Washington, D.C., slave owners to be compensated for the loss of their property, other human beings, black people. And this is our history. In the middle of the Civil War, the government still was doing what white supremacy demands, which is favoring the white class over everyone else. And here is what Martin Luther King said, and I think many of us, if not most of us, have never heard this before. It's not brought up in the official celebrations of his life, usually. Martin Luther King Jr., the great prophet, said, "At the very same time that America refused to give the Negro any land, through an act of Congress, our government was giving away millions of acres of land in the West and the Midwest, which meant that it was willing to undergird its white peasants from Europe with an economic floor. But not only did they give the land, they built land-grant colleges with government money to teach them how to farm. And not only that, but they also provided county agents to further their expertise in farming. And not only that, says Martin Luther King Jr., but they also provided low interest rates in order that they could mechanize their farms. And not only that, today many of these people are receiving millions of dollars in federal subsidies not to farm. And they're the very people telling the black man that he ought to lift himself by his own bootstraps. And this is what we're faced with, and this is the reality. And now when we come to Washington in this campaign, we are coming to get our check. The powerful words of the prophet Martin Luther King Jr. This is not the Martin Luther King they pull out on MLK Day or Black History Month. So what was the Civil War and the Confederate flag really about? It was about the right to own other human beings as slaves. It was about culture, and the culture was white supremacy. It was about those things that the people who say the monuments should stay up. It's just that their history is causing them to see heritage and culture in a way that is completely false. And so Jeffrey Robinson says, I have an idea. If you want to know why the southern states left the Union, why they started the Civil War, why don't you just ask them? And here's a quote from Mississippi. Our position is thoroughly identified with the institution of slavery, the greatest material interest of the world. A blow at slavery is a blow at commerce and civilization. Follow the money. And from the state of Louisiana, this quote, "The people of the slaveholding states are bound together by the same necessity and determination to preserve African slavery." Alabama declared that the election of Lincoln cannot be regarded otherwise than a solemn declaration on the part of a great majority of the northern people of hostility to the South, her property, and her institutions. Her property, the property of these white, rich plantation owners, were the human beings that they owned, and the institutions was the institution of white supremacy and slavery. They're telling you as plainly as they can. And my question is, why are we so unwilling to listen? And then he says, this is my favorite, a quote, "All white men are and of right ought to be entitled to equal civil and political rights, that the servitude of the African race as it is existing in the states is mutually beneficial to both bond and free, and is abundantly authorized and justified by the experience of mankind and the revealed will of the Almighty Creator." What despicable bullshit. Do you think that they stopped believing this because the war was over? They're telling you as clearly as they can that the South, and with our people, of course, slavery is the element of all value. And the destruction of that destroys all that is property. And so many whites, especially the rich white plantation owners, why we're willing to send our fathers and brothers and sons to make war in the North to try and separate our country. Because if we don't, you're taking away our very lifeblood. Slavery. Follow the money. We need these slaves. We're comfortable with it, and we thought you were too. The Confederate battle flag. And if you want to go to the person who would have the best read on what that flag, the Confederate flag, meant, how about from the person who created that flag? And this is what he had to say. As a people, we're fighting to maintain the heaven-ordained supremacy of the white man over the inferior or colored race. If we ain't fighting to keep slavery, then what the hell are we fighting for? This from the creator of the Confederate flag. There's no question about what the Civil War was about. There's no question about the monuments to that war, because every person that is lionized or almost worshipped in those monuments may have been brave, they may have been strong, they may have done incredible acts of courage on the battlefield, they killed other people and maybe gave their own lives, and they did it so that they could own other human beings like chattel property. Why isn't there a statue of Heinrich Himmler in Germany? Why isn't there a statue of a Nazi soldier in Germany? Just saying. Hey, he was just fighting for his country. They, the people in Germany, have figured out something that we haven't here in the United States. And one of the reasons is they have dealt honestly with their past. The first bale of new cotton crop was sold at auction for $1,500 on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. 1917, many years after the war, and the cotton was still king in the South. The reason for that was that slavery, as it was practiced during the Civil War, continued for decades after the Civil War. Blacks were simply arrested for crimes like vagrancy. They were put into jail, rented out to the very same plantations where they had been slaves. And this time, their work was compensated not by paying them, but by paying the municipality that imprisoned them in the first place, because the plantation owners needed free or nearly free labor. And that practice went on until the 1940s. And he says, as a kid growing up in Memphis, I can still remember both of my parents were born in 1926, so they were actually born after the Arkansas shootout. But I remember conversations with my parents and their friends where they would talk about the thing that happened in Arkansas. And it wasn't until I was much older that I finally found out what it was. And I said, Mommy, Daddy, why wouldn't you tell us? Why would you refer to it that way? And of course, their view was, we didn't want to scare you. The thing that happened in Arkansas was that a whole bunch of black folks got together in a church to talk about trying to unionize. And when you have a large group of black people together, you could get whipped for gathering in a group. Well, the white police responded, and everybody had guns. 2 police officers ended up getting killed. And this was from the newspaper just about 7 days later. The trouble at Hoop Spur and at Elaine, those are towns in Arkansas, has been settled. The soldiers here to preserve order will now return to Little Rock within a short time. No innocent Negro has been arrested, and those of you who were at home and at work have no occasion to worry. Just remain at work, just as if nothing had happened. Stop talking, stay at home, go to work, don't worry. By October 31st, 122 people had been charged with crimes. By November 5th, the first 12 had been tried, convicted, and sentenced to death. The white newspapers will tell you that nearly 250 people died in Arkansas. The black newspapers will tell you it was more like 800, because many of the bodies were simply pushed into the Mississippi River, so they weren't recovered. And finally, 1921, the black community in Tulsa, Oklahoma was one of the most prosperous communities in America. The whites there decided they weren't going to have it, so they simply burned it to the ground. Almost 300 people killed. Strong words of truth from Jeffrey Robinson's powerful speech, The South, Slavery, and the Lost Cause. Good night.
Live every day as if it were the last, because before you know it, time goes past and life's just not that long. Tell all you love that you love them so, because even if you do, they might not know, and one day we'll all be gone. Taste the wind, don't let it blow on by. Sing songs of love, let the music get you high, and when it's said and done, you'll know the sun will shine on. And when it's said